This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Kelly Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Shanghai battered by what could be record-breaking rainfall in the wake of tropical storm Kongray, which swept over Taiwan as a typhoon, leaving a trail of destruction. 2 people dead and thousands without power. The U.S. turns to China to stop North Korean troops from fighting for Russia and Ukraine, but Beijing says that their growing ties are not its concern. Meantime, Japan and the EU sign a groundbreaking security partnership packed with military drills, senior-level talks, and defense collaborations. And Japan's biggest brokerage firm out with a solid report card, but mounting scandals involving bond trading and even an attempted murder are clouding Nomura's outlook. Also in East Asia Tonight, we delve into the world of Hello Kitty as the iconic character celebrates her 50th birthday. We'll have an expert on cuteness and pack for us the makings of this global pop culture phenomenon. A tropical storm Kongray is lashing the Chinese financial hub Shanghai with heavy rains and strong winds as it brushes past China's eastern coast. Well, the storm has forced the closure of all ferry services in Shanghai and the suspension of several high-speed trains. Heavy downpour is expected to persist across most parts of the city. First responders are on standby for emergencies and rescue operations. Weather officials warned that the deluge brought on by Kongray could break November rainfall records set more than 40 years ago. Well, Kongray downgraded from a typhoon after wreaking havoc in Taiwan following its landfall in Taitung yesterday. The storm was reportedly the biggest to hit the island in nearly 30 years. At least 2 people were killed and more than 500 others injured. Japan is next in Kongray's path, and the nation is on high alert. Weather officials there forecast that the storm will bring downpours to the country's western regions today and tomorrow, and to eastern Japan over the weekend. Well, cleanup operations are underway in Taiwan. Workers removing trees and damaged structures as they clear the debris left in the wake of Kongray. But heavy rains are set to persist, with downpours forecast for parts of central and southern Taiwan. Air travel on the island continues to be disrupted. Almost 200 international and domestic flights have been cancelled. Now for more, we are joined now by CNA Shanghai correspondent Tan Yu-Guan. Yu-Guan, we can see what the weather is like in Shanghai right now. Tell us, is it going to worsen in the next couple of hours, in the next day or two? And how exactly is the city preparing for the storm?
I think we have pretty much, Othelli, have passed the worst of Typhoon Kongray. In terms of wind speed, as you mentioned, Typhoon Kongray is a pretty strong typhoon, but as far as its impact in terms of wind on Shanghai, well, it's much weaker than Babinka, which hit Shanghai directly, if you recall, in September. Now, that said, it has brought a lot of rain on the city. At one area in Shanghai recorded up to 185 millimeters of rain. That's quite comparable to what Babinka brought to Shanghai in September. And now in Zhejiang province, 14 rivers have issued flood alerts. Ahead of the typhoon, authorities have also issued a level 4 emergency response alert. That's for Shanghai, Zhejiang, as well as Jiangsu and Fujian provinces. Now, that is the lower of the 4-level system. That said, Shanghai and Zhejiang have launched level 2 emergency responses. What that means is that, at least in Shanghai, they have issued guidance to check on hazards in construction sites, prepare for sandbags. Some construction were also suspended, and workers were prepped for possible evacuation. Now, the Shanghai Met Agency has since lowered its storm warning from orange to yellow. That means that that is the second lowest level. That means the curbs or speed curbs for highways have been cancelled. However, the speed limit of 40 kilometers per hour for bridges crossing rivers are still in place. The public is also advised to stay indoors if possible. Tally?
You've mentioned that, you brought 185 millimeters of rain in some parts of Shanghai, and also the storm alert has been brought down. But do we know what disruptions the storm has brought on Shanghai as well as the surrounding areas?
Yes, the rain has brought quite a bit of disruption to Shanghai, especially in terms of transportation. Now, in Shanghai Pudong Airport, nearly 500 flights were cancelled. That's about a quarter of all flights. At one point, when we checked the app for the airport, nearly all flights were delayed. Now, in Hongqiao Airport, that's on the other end of the city, away from the coast, as much as 15% of the flights were cancelled. That's about 150 flights. Now, in Fujian Province, Jiangsu Province, as well as Zhejiang Province, a lot of, at least 15 to about a third to about a fifth of all flights were cancelled, depending on which airport we are talking about. Now, in Shanghai itself, ferries across the Huangpu River were also cancelled. However, schools were opened. Universities did shift their lessons online, but schools for the lower tiers were open. However, kids were allowed to go home a bit earlier. For example, 8th graders were told to go home at 2 p.m. instead of the usual 5 p.m. That said, in some areas of Fujian province, schools were closed outright. Now, in all, Conway's impact is expected to ease, as I mentioned earlier, and by Saturday, we should have things back to normal. Oteli?
Oh, good to know. I know we've been told to stay indoors, but I really appreciate you braving the rain. Thanks so very much, CNA's Tan Yu-Guan in Shanghai. In other news, North Korea says it will stand by Russia until Moscow's victory in Ukraine. Foreign Minister Cho Sun-hui is in Moscow for strategic talks with her Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov amid a U.S. warning that up to 8,000 North Korean troops have reached Russia's border to fight against Ukraine. Mr. Lavrov hailed the close ties between the two armies, while Ms. Cho called the relationship one of invincible military comradeship. Washington has urged Beijing to use its sway with Pyongyang to try to prevent the escalation. But China says the growing relationship between Russia and North Korea is not its concern, and that its position on striving for a political settlement of the war remains unchanged.
We've had communications with China. In fact, we had a robust conversation just this week, and I think they know well the concerns that we have and the expectations that both in word and deed, they'll use the influence that they have to work to curb these activities. So we'll see.
Earlier, the U.S. and South Korea held high-level talks in Washington to discuss the partnership between Pyongyang and Moscow. Seoul has condemned North Korea for sending troops and called for their immediate withdrawal. The deployment of North Korean soldiers marks the first time that Russia has welcomed foreign troops on its soil in more than a century. Washington has vowed to increase security assistance to Kyiv by providing more artillery, armored vehicles, and extra munitions. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol had also raised the possibility of supplying Ukraine with weapons. Well, earlier we spoke with Mason Ritchie, Associate Professor of International Politics at Seoul's Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. And he told us why China may not yet find it necessary to intervene in North Korea's troop deployment in Russia.
We hear that supposedly China is wary of this increasing alliance and defense cooperation and security cooperation between North Korea and Russia. And there's a certain logic that argues that indeed Beijing at some point might become irritated sufficiently with North Korea, its only treaty ally, having a dalliance with Russia, which of course is really just a replay of the Cold War when Pyongyang played Beijing and Moscow off of each other. One could argue that this is the case and that might open up some possibility for the U.S., South Korea, Japan, European allies to drive a wedge between China and North Korea and China and Russia. But I don't think we're anywhere near that point yet. China's not going to give up North Korea as a treaty ally. And we haven't seen, any recent behavior from China that would indicate that their external actions reflect that growing discontent with Pyongyang's relationship with Moscow. So right now, I don't think that we're going to see any strategic shifts, and I think it would require quite a bit more cooperation and quite a bit more danger to China's interest for this to take place. And right now, I don't really see how the war in Ukraine and its perpetuation through North Korean troops being on the ground really does much to damage China's interest. So why would it take this step to cooperate somewhat with the U.S. And its partners and allies, considering the rivalry and geopolitical competition that's going on today between those blocs?
Japan and the European Union have announced a new defense and security deal, calling it the first of its kind between Europe and an Indo-Pacific nation. Local media said that this would include more military drills, senior-level talks, and defense industry cooperation. Well, the EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, and Japanese Foreign Minister Takashi Iwaya signed the agreement after holding talks in Tokyo today. Mr. Iwaya said that the agreement will cover all fronts of security and defense and see Japan and the EU working together to maintain a rules-based international order. Specific areas include maritime security, space, and foreign disinformation and interference. Mr. Borrell said that EU-Japan relations have never been stronger, and he called the Defense Pact a historical new chapter in their relationship.
We live in a very dangerous world. We live in a world of growing rivalries, climate accidents, and threats of war. And there is only one antidote to this world, to this challenging world, which is partnerships among friends.
China has urged Vietnam to better educate and manage its fishermen so they do not engage in what it calls illegal activities in Chinese waters. Well, yesterday, Hanoi protested Beijing's detention of its fishermen and their vessels in a contested Paracel Islands, saying they were illegally detained. It's not clear how many people were held or when. China claims almost the entire South China Sea, putting it at odds with Vietnam, Philippines, and Malaysia, among others. Meanwhile, China has conducted a formation exercise in the contested waters that will allow it to carry out more diverse and complex missions in the future. For the first time, the drills involved 2 aircraft carriers, Liaoning and Shandong. During the training, the formation also traversed the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea. Soviet-built Liaoning is China's oldest aircraft carrier that was commissioned back in 2012. The Shandong entered service in 2019, while China's third carrier, the Fujian, was unveiled in 2022. And it is undergoing sea trials and is not yet operational. Well, time now for a break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, the International Monetary Fund warns of rising risks of Asian economies amid China's property sector woes and a possible rise in trade tensions. And later, find out why Chinese e-commerce giant Temu is under scrutiny in Europe and the US. Hello again. Good to have your company this Friday evening on East Asia Tonight. Well, it's now time for your business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, it's all about Japan's biggest brokerage firm. It's out with a firm report card. But what is all this talk about, the big scandals, that's clouding its reputation?
Well, you did hear right. Nomura, that's Japan's biggest brokerage, out with better than expected earnings. But the results have been overshadowed by mounting scandals and involving bond trading and even an attempted murder. Now, profits for the July to September period more than doubled from a year earlier to $645 million. It also beat a consensus forecast of $413 million. But these scandals are threatening to derail the CEO's efforts to revive growth. Kentaro Okuda and other top executives have agreed to take pay cuts after the company admitted an employee manipulated the bond market. On top of this, Japanese media reported a man was arrested on suspicion of robbery and attempted murder of clients when he worked for Nomura. Financial authorities also reported in September that a Nomura employee placed misleading orders in the government bond futures market back in 2021. The trader profited by placing large orders without intending to buy or sell all of them. Now, the scandal has prompted at least 10 institutional investors to take their bond trading and underwriting business elsewhere. The International Monetary Fund has warned of a rise in risks for Asian economies as increasing trade tensions, market turbulence, and China's ongoing property sector woes bite. In its latest regional economic outlook report, the IMF said persistent downward price pressures from China could provoke trade tensions by hurting neighboring countries that share similar export structures. The body has urged Beijing to take more policy action, including steps to facilitate property sector adjustment, as well as strengthen private consumption to ensure a more demand-driven economy recovery. The IMF upgraded its forecasts from April, expecting Asia's economy to expand 4.6% this year and 4.4% in 2025. Now, for China in particular, the IMF expects 4.8% growth this year compared to China's own target of roughly 5%, and while growth is expected to slow further to 4.5% in 2025. The IMF also warned of an acute risk stemming from, quote, the escalation in tit-for-tat retaliatory tariffs between major trading partners. Worries about a US-China trade war are growing due to the prospect of another Donald Trump presidency. Mr. Trump has pledged to impose a 10% tariff on imports from all countries and 60% duties on Chinese goods. The IMF warns that could affect global supply chains and lead to higher prices for consumers and investors. More signs of progress in Chinese factory activity just after Beijing launched supersized stimulus measures about a month ago. The Caixin manufacturing PMI swung back to growth at 50.3 in October, stronger than market estimates. Remember, reading above 50 separates expansion from contraction. Now, this comes after the official manufacturing PMI reading also showed expansion in October for the first time since April. Experts say the rebound could be attributed to partly stronger domestic demand amid Beijing's efforts to prop up the economy. Greater China market equities ending the session mixed on the back of those PMI numbers. Shanghai Composite down 0.2%, Shenzhen reversing earlier gains to end 1.3% in the red. The Hang Seng Index, though, almost 1% higher. And the Hang Seng Mainland Properties Index also advancing after property sales in China returned to growth for the first time this year in October. South Korea's export growth slowed to a 7-month low last month, pointing to signs of waning demand for its key products, including semiconductors. Now, exports rose 4.6% from a year earlier, marking the smallest increase since March and slowing from gains of 7.5% in September. Now, South Korea is, of course, the world's biggest source of memory chips, and semiconductor exports rose to $12.5 billion in October, lower than the record high of $13.6 billion in September. Asia's fourth largest economy relies heavily on external demand to drive activity, and American and Chinese demand are key for Seoul's exports momentum. Now, shipments to the US matched the pace seen in September, while exports to China jumped to a 25-month high, But next week's US elections threaten to upend trade relations and could take a further toll on South Korea's economy. A Chinese e-commerce platform, Temu, is facing a probe in the European Union for allegedly illegal product sales. And across the Atlantic, the Biden administration is targeting both Temu and Shein, two of the fastest-growing retailers in the country, as they gear up for the busiest shopping season of the year. Now, Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
For Emma Kim, the prices were just too tempting.
I was a freshman in high school. It was mostly through TikTok. There were a lot of creators or whatever on there who do hauls of all these really cute and very fashionable pieces that they got for insanely cheap prices. And I thought, oh, you know, that's so cool, what a steal. And that kind of motivated me. Also, I was very poor during COVID.
Now 19 years old and sporting a thrift store sweater in her college dorm, Emma says she no longer buys from these sites.
I also had ordered a small white button-down shirt to wear kind of underneath clothes, and I think I wore it once and the button fell off, so I was kind of a little shocked. And then I complained to my mom, and my mom was like, well, why do you think, you bought this for $4? Why do you think it's so cheap? So then that's when I kind of stopped.
But millions of Americans have not. China-backed e-commerce platforms Shein and Temu each ship an estimated 1 million packages a day on average to the US, according to parcel shipping consultant ShipMatrix. Instead of bringing bulk shipments into the US, Shein and Temu ship directly to American shoppers, allowing them to legally skip import duties because US law exempts shipments worth less than $800 from tax. It saves foreign e-commerce platforms millions of dollars in import fees, which the White House says undercuts American workers, retailers and manufacturers. It wants to close the loophole known as the de minimis exemption, forcing these retailers to pay when they import goods of any value. The proposals won't go into effect immediately. They'll be subject to comment by industry before being finalised in the coming months. In statements, both Shein and Temu said that the import loophole was not central to their success. Shein said that its growth was anchored in its on-demand business model, while Temu said its growth is not dependent on this policy.
My guess is that the impact will be very minimal. Here's why. As a customer, if I'm buying a T-shirt for $3, so now I have to pay duties. The duties may be 10%, 20%, no big deal. In that case, the price is still much lower than other retailers.
There are also data privacy concerns. Temu's facing a lawsuit from Arkansas's Attorney General, alleging that its app grants itself access to virtually all data on a user's cell phone. Temu has categorically denied these allegations, which it says are based on misinformation that circulated online and totally unfounded. It says it will vigorously defend itself.
It's clear that U.S. policymakers are deeply concerned about data practices by companies and by nation states that have interests that are not friendly to the U.S. I think we've all been in a circumstance where our mobile devices ask us whether or not we want to share certain information with an app. When you have mobile applications that, even in the face of consumers trying to deny these permissions, try to circumvent those permissions and try to get at that information, that's what concerns some of the enforcement entities in the United States.
Emma has concerns too.
It really is kind of a waste of money if you're not going to wear it again and it's, not very good quality. So I try not to, but it is very, very tempting, especially when you see people around you show up with these really cute outfits that they got immediately for next to nothing.
But millions of Americans are tempted every day, making it harder for US officials to try to regulate these increasingly popular platforms. Kate Fisher, CNA, Washington.
And that'll do it for the business news. Oteli.
Thanks so very much, Roland, for the business report. Well, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, Indian soldiers and Chinese troops exchange sweets at the disputed border amid a thaw in tensions. And why many supporters of former Pakistani leader Imran Khan are rooting for Donald Trump to win the U.S. presidential election. Tropical storm Kongray lashes Shanghai with potentially record-breaking rainfall after passing through Taiwan as a typhoon, killing two there and leaving thousands without power. The U.S. turns to China to stop North Korean troops from fighting for Russia and Ukraine, but Beijing says their growing ties are not its concern. Japan and the EU sign a groundbreaking security partnership packed with military drills, senior-level talks and defense collaborations. India and China have reportedly moved most of their frontline troops further from the disputed border, while India's defense chief says the process of disengagement of Indian and Chinese troops at the disputed Himalayan border is, quote, almost complete. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh says that India aims to take further steps beyond the disengagement at the border, but that will take time. The Indian Army shared these photos of Indian and Chinese troops exchanging boxes of sweets on Diwali at 2 points along the high-altitude border. China said it hopes to continue working with India to jointly safeguard peace along the line of actual control.
我们希望印方与中方相向而行，以两国领导人重要共识为指引，持续落实好上述解决方案，共同维护好边境地区和平安宁。
The thaw in relations comes 4 years after the two nuclear powers clashed in the Galwan River Valley in Ladakh over border infrastructure. Soldiers from both sides used clubs and sticks to fight each other with a ban in place on the use of guns and explosives near the border. Where at least 20 Indian and 4 Chinese soldiers were killed. The incident led to a deterioration in ties and a military buildup, with both countries positioning troops and military assets close to confrontation point. The two countries reached a border patrol agreement 10 days ago after 4 years and more than 20 rounds of talks. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met last week on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Russia. This was their first bilateral meeting in 5 years. More than 62 million U.S. voters have already cast their ballots in early voting for the 2024 presidential election. The number accounts for almost 40% of the total vote count in 2020 and is breaking records in several states. Well, current opinion polls suggest Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump are running neck and neck, including in the 7 battleground states likely to determine the outcome of the election. In Georgia, for example, officials say more than 3.5 million people have voted early. Well, that's about 45% of registered voters, an all-time high. Both parties are hoping a high early voting turnout could give them an edge. And of course, the U.S. elections will also be closely watched thousands of kilometers away by long-standing ally Pakistan. In Islamabad, some believe a Republican White House will lead to increased scrutiny over the government's growing engagements with Beijing. But many supporters of jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan are rooting for former President Donald Trump to win a second term. Hira Mustafa explains.
This was the last time that a Pakistani Prime Minister met a US President. In 2019, Donald Trump famously received Imran Khan at the White House, a meeting seen as the high point of bilateral ties in recent years. The camaraderie between the two populist leaders saw the US and Pakistan talking in unison, rare in a relationship that has often swung widely between security cooperation and concerns over Pakistan's close ties with China.
I think both Mr. Khan and Mr. Trump don't feel themselves bound by any norms. They are both transactional, and they will say and do whatever they feel will get them into power.
It's one reason many supporters of Imran Khan hope Donald Trump returns to the White House. The former Prime Minister was ousted from power in 2022 and thrown in jail last year over corruption charges. Some of Mr. Khan's supporters believe that as president, Mr. Trump could pressure Islamabad to release him. But leaders of Mr. Khan's PTI party are downplaying that idea.
We are the largest political party in the country, and we will remain so. So our view is that the PTI is willing to and ready to work with whatever US administration comes about, and all US administrations will want to work with the PTI.
Observers say, looking at the big picture, Donald Trump may not be great for Pakistan. As president, Mr. Trump got $300 million in military aid, accusing Islamabad of failing to tackle militant groups operating on its soil. He also oversaw greater defense and security coordination with Pakistan's arch-rival India, further straining ties. Relations improved somewhat under President Joe Biden, with the restoration of military assistance and more investments in Pakistan's tech and green energy sectors. But the Biden administration is wary of its allies' partnership with Chinese companies to develop ballistic missiles. The government says it hopes whoever wins the U.S. election, be it Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, will uphold Islamabad's position as a strategic partner.
The challenge for Pakistan's government is to do a fresh round of vigorous diplomacy in trying to explain Pakistan's situation. The US should still see Pakistan as a partner, but given Pakistan's continuous issues and challenges, it should more focus on how it can express to the Pakistani people that the United States is a helping hand instead of a censorious schoolmaster.
One issue that concerns Washington is that as Islamabad deepens its economic and military ties with Beijing, it risks becoming a client state of China, which Americans view as a threat.
In terms of, if we talk about the military superiority that they want to ensure, then the containment policy of China, for which there's a bipartisan support, but Trump is going to be even more focused than the Democrats on that. And that could be tricky for Pakistan.
Analysts warn that both a Democrat or a Republican president are likely to take an aggressive stance in America's economic and commercial relations with China. They say Islamabad's goal to please the two superpowers is not sustainable.
You see, Pakistan cannot make a balance between China and United States. Pakistan have to make a choice that who is your best friend, China or United States.
Pakistan's capacity to handle relations with the next US administration will be a litmus test for Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's government. There will be a different face in the White House from next year, and Islamabad will have to adapt to what could be a more hawkish US foreign policy, especially towards China. Hira Mustafa, CNA, Islamabad.
And of course, can keep up right here on CNA as we bring you updates of the presidential and congressional polls and live wall-to-wall coverage from 7 a.m. Singapore-Hong Kong time on the 6th of November. Right, time now for another break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight. It's pretty hard to miss this iconic character that's just turned 50. Well, we'll be speaking to an expert to find out why Hello Kitty continues to enchant fans after so many years. Plus, Singapore hosts the biggest esports event yet, with teams vying for $1 million prize. Good to have you on East Asia Tonight. Japan's kawaii Hello Kitty is marking a milestone. For 50 years, the iconic character, created without a mouth, has adorned almost everything from keychains to entire airplanes. Well, CNA's Michio Ishida takes us through the Hello Kitty craze that's currently gripping Tokyo.
Well wishes for the kawaii character's 50th birthday can be seen around Tokyo. Even Kuromon, or Black Gate, which is designated an important cultural property, is being lit up in pink for Hello Kitty's special day. And it's like a shrine to Kitty here at Tokyo National Museum, Japan's oldest museum. Merchandise from as far back as 1975 traces her evolution into a global icon. Hello Kitty was created in 1974 by Sanrio's designer. Her real name is Kitty White. She's a kind girl. She has a dream of becoming a pianist or a poet. She's not Japanese. She's from the suburbs of London. Her father is George. He's reliable and humorous. Her mother is Mary, warm and makes delicious apple pie. And she has a twin sister, Mimi, who's a little shy. Kitty soon conquered the heart of Japanese fans, especially little girls.
一人で家にいても 一緒じゃないですか。で学校に行っても筆箱とかで一緒だからこういつも私専用にいてくれる友達みたいなこうなんかお世話になりました。
She is now marketed in 130 countries, including the US, where she made her international debut.
Here's my little kimono. Hello Kitty. I have a lot of Hello Kitty stuff at home in America, but yeah, I love Hello Kitty.
50 years on, Hello Kitty still wields plenty of soft power. Anticipation over her celebrations bumped up parent company Sanrio's profits, which exceeded 10 billion yen for the first time ever in the second quarter. Her presence remains strongly felt in pop culture, big brands, and especially in her fans' hearts. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
And for more insights into the success of Sanrio's poster girl, we now speak with Joshua Paul Dale, Professor of English Studies at Cho University. And he's also the founder of a new academic field called Cute Studies, and also the author of Irresistible, How Cuteness Wired Our Brains and Conquered the World. Warm welcome, Professor Dale. You're the best person to tell us all about Hello Kitty's impressive 50-year journey with such global influence. And, you know, Professor, I grew up collecting all the trinkets, and I had the stationery set. I grew out of it, you know, when I was in my teens, but there are a lot of adults still collecting, you know, all the crazy items. So help us understand that. What is it about her design, her concept that has made her such an enduring symbol of kawaii culture?
Well, I think the most important thing is her iconic design. It's so simple. Just 3 circles and 3 straight lines for whiskers and a hair bow. Always have to have the hair bow. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Hello Kitty. So if you go into a shop, even if it has thousands of items, you can easily see Hello Kitty from the other side of the shop. It's just so stands out so well. And I think that's one reason for her popularity.
Also, given that, you know, Hello Kitty, was strategically marketed as a British rather than Japanese. I mean, that was back in the day. But what role do you think cultural adaptability play in its global success?
It played a huge part initially because Hello Kitty debuted in the 1970s. And at that time, Sanrio didn't really want her associated with Japan. And after that, her popularity grew slowly through girls all over the world who then became women. Some of them grew out of their attachment to Hello Kitty, like you did, but others did not, and they kept buying the products. And then in the 2000s, Japan became really popular. Manga and anime swept the world, and Hello Kitty went along for the ride and enjoyed renewed popularity after that.
And there's also, I was quite surprised in my research to discover that there's this new layer of complexity to Sanrio's lineup, because it includes other characters like Agretsuko, which is an angry red panda, channeling all the frustrations of the modern working woman. So tell us, how has the concept of cuteness evolved, and how will it continue to evolve?
Yes, Sanrio has dozens and dozens of products, and they do a regular poll about their products' popularity. This year, Hello Kitty came in 5th. First place was Cinema Roll, a new character. So Sanrio is always trying to innovate, and like you said, one of the new characters is Agretsuko, who appears on a Netflix program, and that combines cuteness and righteous anger. So anytime you can combine cuteness with some other quality that will attract people, then you get the warm glow of cuteness and you have something else to spark your interest as well. And that's how cuteness is evolving into the future.
Which leads me to question, if new technologies like generative AI and robotics, how is it going to reshape the concept of cuteness? Or do you think there are aspects of Hello Kitty's appeal that you think technology simply cannot replicate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So far, it seems like cuteness really needs the human touch in design. I've seen artificial AI generated cats and other cute things, and they're just not quite there yet. But of course, AI learns very, very rapidly, so we don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know about Sanrio, but I imagine a world where AI, instead of learning from a huge corpus of text or images, has watched every cute animal video that's ever been uploaded to Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. I mean, then that AI could perform cuteness in ways that we, have never seen before. And I think that might be the future.
And what also shocked me was the fact that Hello Kitty, I mean, over the 50 years, it has actually amassed an estimated $80 billion in terms of lifetime earnings. But how does it compare with Western icons like, Mickey Mouse and Star Wars?
Well, it seems to have outperformed Mickey Mouse, which is not bad because Mickey Mouse is twice the age of Hello Kitty. Mickey Mouse is 100 years old. So overall, Hello Kitty is doing quite well, $80 billion and perhaps even more over the course of her life. So compared to other cute icons, Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh, Hello Kitty does better.
And we know that Sanrio's been cracking down on counterfeits, given the increased efforts to detect all the fake products and issue removal requests. How significant is that? I mean, contributing to its profit margin, for instance.
Oh, you need to ask an economist about that. I have no idea of the numbers. I'm sure Sanrio is really worried about those things, but. Yes.
Yeah, but nevertheless, I mean, it would have an impact, don't you think? It's a pretty significant effort that the Sanrio family is putting in.
Oh, absolutely. And, the other company that really tracks those things carefully is Disney, with Mickey Mouse and their other characters. So, yeah, they're very much interested in cracking down on counterfeits. And yet, people just love the image, and that's what they go for.
So what do you think the future holds for Hello Kitty in today's market? I mean, with growing, domestic as well as Asian competitors.
Yes, absolutely. And the big question is, can they capture the youth market? So will they get that same effect of young people becoming Hello Kitty fans and then growing up and buying more expensive Hello Kitty products as they remain fans? I'm really not sure about that because there is so much competition now. There are hundreds of characters that you become fans of, and this was not true in the 1970s when Hello Kitty launched. So going forward into the future, I'm not really sure if Hello Kitty will have the same influence she has had, but it will be interesting to find out.
All right, can't wait for that. Thank you so very much for joining us this Friday evening, Professor Joshua Paul Dale from Cho University and the author of the book Irresistible, How Cuteness Wired Our Brains and Conquered the World. Meantime, Singapore is hosting its biggest esports event yet, the Blast Premier World Final. 8 of the world's best Counter-Strike 2 teams will go head-to-head for a lucrative prize, and all while putting Singapore and Southeast Asia firmly on the esports map. Well, CNA's Paulson dives into what this event means for the region.
Singapore's hosting of the Blast Premier World Final is not just about the thrill of the game. It's a milestone for Southeast Asia's esports sector. Over the weekend, the city will witness top-tier teams battling it out for a $1 million prize in a tournament that's already seen record-breaking ticket sales. For international entertainment giant AEG, backing this event in Asia was a natural step. The company says it's about connecting with a large and engaged audience in the region.
As a first foray into esports, what attracted you to this event?
When you take a look at it, particularly let's take a look at Singapore, and you find that in esports participation or an active interest in it, 59% of all Singaporeans between the age of 18 and 34 are esports fans. So as you just look at it from a pure numbers data perspective, you would have to say this is very much a sweet spot for what is a passion point for Singaporeans.
AEG's involvement underscores Singapore's growing status as an esports hub. And the Blast Premier World Final is drawing in fans and talent from across the globe to witness top-tier Counter-Strike action. Tickets are fully booked for the weekend, proving there's clear demand for esports in the region. But the event doesn't just benefit esports. Singapore Tourism Board's backing indicates that events such as these boost local businesses. International and regional tourists are flocking to Singapore, bringing economic opportunities across hospitality, retail and transport sectors.
Well, I think like a strong audience and a strong demand from both local but from a region is super important. Like we're doing like a broadcast show, an arena show. We want to film a good atmosphere. That's important for the players to perform well. If the players get reactions from the crowd, then they will be animated. That creates like a better show overall and something that we can broadcast to the viewers around the world. It's not just about like the show that is in the arena, like a classic or a normal concert, for example. This is like a really global broadcast product, and the more animated fans we have and the more we have of fans in the arena, the better the broadcast product we can create.
For players such as Australia's team captain Casper Moller, competing in Singapore is about more than just a prize. It's a chance to engage directly with fans in the region.
Being the captain of the team, I love seeing my teammates succeed. I love seeing that we've been practicing something for weeks, seeing it pan out in an official game, seeing it work, the joy on their faces when we're winning, kind of that camaraderie, team spirit feeling. That's why I compete, not the prize money.
Singapore's role in this high-profile event underscores its potential as a leader in Asia's esports scene. With plans already underway for more events next year, Southeast Asia's gaming future looks promising. As fans and players gather in Singapore, the Blast Premier World Final shows how esports can drive both competition and economic growth in the region. The tournament wraps up on Sunday. Paul Soong, CNA, Singapore.
Japanese scientists have built the world's first wooden satellite, and it's set to take its maiden voyage into space next Tuesday. It's actually a tiny cube that measures 10 centimeters on each side, weighing just under 1 kilogram. Researchers used a traditional technique that doesn't need screws or glue. The satellite was developed by Kyoto University and a Japanese logging firm, which provided the necessary magnolia wood. Well, this palm-sized device aims to demonstrate the potential of renewable materials as the space exploration matures.
人間が作ることができる資材を使って宇宙に発展していければ人間は持続可能なそういう社会も作ることができるということになるわけです。ということで宇宙で木を使えるかどうかを調べようとして木造人工衛星を作ったわけです。
Well, a wooden satellite can reduce the environmental impact of satellite re-entries, which deposit harmful metal particles when they fall back to Earth. Researchers also note that wood would be more durable in space than on Earth, with no water or oxygen to degrade it. To measure how long material can endure the extreme environment, a LignoSat is expected to stay in orbit for 6 months. And that's all we have for you in East Asia tonight, this Friday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And look us up on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. Well, have a good Friday and a better weekend.